the last Viking king, Harald Hardrada's final battle. September 25th, 1066. The Viking army was relaxed. Just 5 days earlier, they had won a stunning victory at the Battle of Fulford. York appeared ready to submit. The campaign seemed to be unfolding exactly as planned. Many warriors had left their armor aboard the ships. Others rested in the late summer sun. Some gathered supplies. Few expected serious fighting that day. Then reports began to spread through the camp. An army was approaching. At first, nobody seemed particularly concerned. King Harold Godwinson of England was supposed to be hundreds of miles away. No army could move that quickly. No army could cover that distance in only a few days. But the reports kept coming. More riders, more witnesses, more certainty. Soon the truth became impossible to ignore. King Harold Godwinson was here, and he was close, very close. Within hours, one of the greatest warriors of the age would be dead. His name was Harald Hardrada, and many historians consider him the last great Viking king. But to understand how he arrived at Stamford Bridge, we need to begin much earlier. Harald Hardrada was born around the year 1015 into a Norway divided by rival kings, ambitious nobles, and constant warfare. Power was fragile. Alliances shifted constantly, and violence was often the final judge of political disputes. From an early age, Harold learned a simple lesson. Power was never given. It had to be taken. At 15 years old, he followed his half-brother, King Olaf Haraldsson, into battle. Olaf had lost control of Norway and returned to reclaim his throne. Thousands rallied to stop him. The two sides met at Stiklestad in 1030. The battle became one of the defining moments in Norwegian history. Olaf was killed. His army collapsed, and the young Harold was badly wounded. For many princes, such a defeat would have ended their story. For Harold, it was only the beginning. With a handful of loyal followers, he escaped eastward, across forests, across rivers, across hostile territory. Eventually he reached Kievan Rus, one of the most powerful states in Eastern Europe. There Harold recovered. He learned. He built connections. And he began to think beyond survival. He wanted wealth. He wanted glory. And eventually he wanted a kingdom. But Kievan Rus was only a stop along the journey. Harold continued south, toward the richest city in the known world, Constantinople. To a Norwegian warrior, the city must have seemed almost unimaginable. Its massive walls stretched for miles. Its churches glittered with gold. Its markets overflowed with goods from 3 continents. This was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, one of the greatest powers on earth. Harold joined the Varangian Guard, the emperor's elite bodyguard. The Varangians were feared across the empire, chosen for their loyalty, respected for their ferocity. They fought wherever the emperor needed them, in the Balkans, in Sicily, across the Mediterranean, along distant frontiers. For years, Harold campaigned across the known world. Most Viking leaders gained experience through raids. Harold gained experience through empires. He learned how great states organized armies, how cities defended themselves, how rulers maintained power across vast territories, and while he fought, he accumulated something equally valuable: money. A great deal of it. When Harold eventually left Constantinople, he was no longer an exiled prince. He was one of the richest and most experienced military commanders in Northern Europe. He returned to Scandinavia with a clear objective: the throne of Norway. Years of warfare, diplomacy, and political maneuvering followed. Eventually, Harold achieved his goal. He became king. Most rulers would have been satisfied. Harold was not. His ambitions stretched beyond Norway. Then, history presented him with an extraordinary opportunity. England. In January of 1066, King Edward the Confessor died. His death created a crisis. He left no clear heir. Almost immediately, powerful men began competing for the English throne. The strongest claimant was Harold Godwinson, one of England's most influential nobles. Within days, he was crowned king. but not everyone accepted his claim. Across the North Sea, Harald Hardrada believed he possessed a legitimate claim of his own. The origins of that claim were complicated and remain debated by historians today. What mattered was that Harold believed it was valid, and he possessed the military strength to pursue it. At the same time, another man sought revenge. His name was Tostig Godwinson, and he was the brother of King Harold Godwinson. Years earlier, Tostig had ruled Northumbria in northern England, but rebellion had driven him from power. When King Harold Godwinson failed to restore him, Tostig felt betrayed. His resentment became hatred. Now England's king and his exiled brother stood on opposite sides of a growing conflict. Tostig searched Europe for allies. Eventually, he found Harald Hardrada. The alliance was simple. Harold wanted a kingdom. Tostig wanted revenge. Together, they assembled one of the largest Viking invasions in generations. Hundreds of ships crossed the North Sea. The campaign began brilliantly. At the Battle of Fulford, Harald Hardrada and Tostig Godwinson defeated a large English army. The victory shocked England. York appeared vulnerable. The road ahead seemed open. For a brief moment, it looked as though Harold might succeed where generations of Vikings had failed. He might become King of England. But victory can be dangerous. Success creates confidence, sometimes too much confidence. After Fulford, Harold expected negotiations. He expected time. He expected King Harold Godwinson to arrive eventually. What he did not expect was speed. While Harold celebrated victory, King Harold Godwinson was already moving north. The English king understood something important. Every day Harold remained in England made the invasion stronger. So King Harold gambled everything. His army marched nearly 200 miles in only a few days, one of the most remarkable military movements of the Middle Ages. And it worked. On the morning of September 25th, Harold believed he was attending what would likely be a routine meeting near Stamford Bridge. Many warriors had left their armour behind. The day was not expected to bring major fighting. Then came the reports. An army was approaching. At first the news seemed impossible. King Harold Godwinson should have been far to the south. Yet more reports arrived. More witnesses. More certainty. Soon there could be no doubt. The King of England had arrived. The entire campaign changed in a matter of minutes. Messengers rushed across the camp. Warriors searched for weapons. Men hurried to form ranks. Time suddenly became the most valuable resource on the battlefield. According to later accounts, a small force of Vikings remained on the wrong side of Stamford Bridge. If the English crossed too quickly, the main Viking army might collapse before it had time to organize. A famous story tells of a lone Viking warrior defending the bridge against numerous English soldiers. Whether every detail is true remains uncertain. But the story survived because it captured something real. The Vikings desperately needed time. And somehow, they found it. Eventually, the English crossed. The battle intensified. Harold rode among his warriors. He had spent decades on battlefields. He had fought princes, rebels, mercenaries, and emperors. He had survived exile. He had survived Constantinople. He had survived countless wars. There was little reason for him to believe this battle would be different. The Vikings formed a shield wall. The English attacked. Again and again. The fighting became brutal, exhausting, relentless. Neither side gave ground easily. Then disaster struck. An arrow flew through the chaos. It struck Harald Hardrada in the throat. The king collapsed. One moment he was commanding an army. The next he was dying on an English field. His warriors fought on. Tostig Godwinson continued the resistance, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The invasion collapsed. Of the hundreds of ships that had carried the army to England, only a fraction were needed to carry the survivors home. Harold's dream of conquering England died at Stamford Bridge, but his death represented something larger than the failure of one campaign. For many historians, Stamford Bridge marks the symbolic end of the Viking Age itself. The world was changing. European kingdoms were becoming stronger, governments more organized. The age of independent warrior kings was fading. Harald Hardrada had spent his life mastering the old world, but history was moving toward a new one. And that leads to the lesson. The greatest danger often comes immediately after success. After Fulford, Harold believed the campaign was unfolding exactly as planned. His enemy appeared defeated. His position seemed secure. But the war was not over. Again and again, history teaches the same lesson. Victory can create complacency. Success can blind leaders to emerging threats. The moment you believe the outcome is certain is often the moment risk becomes greatest. Harald Hardrada was a king, a conqueror, a veteran of countless battles, perhaps the ultimate Viking. Yet his final defeat reminds us of a timeless truth. The greatest danger after a victory is believing the war has already been won.